Ryan Reynolds unintentionally ignited a media firestorm when he publicly labeled Justin Baldoni a predator while trying to defend his wife, Blake Lively. The comment, made during a high-profile moment, was meant to showcase his support, but instead it raised eyebrows. What made the situation worse was that Blake had already confided to New York Times journalist Megan Twohey that the incident involving Baldoni wasn't that bad and was not the worst experience she'd had in Hollywood. This private admission starkly contradicted Reynolds' aggressive public stance. The result? A credibility crisis. Viewers and industry insiders began questioning whether the couple was aligned, or if Ryan was recklessly escalating a situation that Blake herself had downplayed. His attempt at being the protective husband didn't silence controversy, it amplified it, sparking doubts about the truth behind their narrative and ultimately fueling the backlash that now threatens both of their reputations. While Blake Lively publicly framed the situation with Justin Baldoni as deeply traumatic and worthy of legal action, her private remarks told a very different story. In a December 2024 interview with New York Times journalist Megan Twohey, Blake admitted the incident in question was not the worst she had experienced in Hollywood. In fact, she described it as relatively minor compared to other, more severe situations she had faced. This quiet confession undercut the entire foundation of her legal case, which was presented to the public as a crusade for justice. The stark contrast between her behind-the-scenes downplaying and her courtroom drama painted her as calculated rather than candid. It became clear that while Blake publicly leaned into the role of victim, she had privately acknowledged that the issue wasn't nearly as serious. This contradiction cast doubt on her intentions and raised the question: if it truly wasn't that bad, why did she pursue such an aggressive legal and media campaign against Baldoni? Behind the scenes, Ryan Reynolds' influence extended far beyond public statements. According to multiple sources, Reynolds allegedly approached executives at WME, one of Hollywood's most powerful talent agencies, during the Deadpool and Wolverine premiere in July 2024 and labeled Justin Baldoni a predator. This wasn't just offhand gossip, it was a deliberate move that reportedly led to WME abruptly dropping Baldoni as a client. The timing was telling. Baldoni pointed directly to Reynolds' comments as the reason for his firing, viewing it as a strategic blow to his professional credibility rather than a move based on legal findings. Ari Emanuel, former CEO of WME, later admitted in a leaked conversation that his loyalty to Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds influenced the decision. He didn't cite hard evidence. He cited trust. Reynolds' behind-the-scenes campaign didn't just damage Baldoni's reputation, it derailed his career. This revelation painted Reynolds not as a supportive husband, but as a Hollywood power player willing to sabotage another man's livelihood based on unverified claims and personal loyalty. The contradictions between Blake Lively's private minimization of the incident and Ryan Reynolds' aggressive public defense shattered their carefully cultivated power couple image. For years, Blake and Ryan were seen as Hollywood's golden pair, witty, philanthropic, and scandal-free. But as more details emerged, their public facade began to crack. Blake quietly told a respected journalist the incident with Baldoni wasn't serious, yet publicly pursued a lawsuit as if it were career-ending abuse. Meanwhile, Reynolds' loud accusations painted Baldoni as a dangerous predator, despite no solid proof and Blake's own conflicting account. These inconsistencies sparked widespread skepticism. Were they aligned in their narrative or running separate PR damage control strategies? The stark gap between their private admissions and public messaging exposed not only poor communication, but also a disturbing level of manipulation. The polished, relatable brand they had spent years building suddenly looked more like a strategic performance than a reflection of reality, and the public started to see through it. As the details of Blake Lively's behind-the-scenes maneuvers came to light, experts began identifying her actions as part of a calculated smear campaign against Justin Baldoni. Renowned psychologist Dr. Ramani, who specializes in narcissistic behavior, publicly broke down how Blake's conduct fit the textbook pattern of a narcissistic smear tactic. According to Dr. Ramani, Blake followed the typical playbook: isolate the target, twist their vulnerabilities, weaponize past mistakes, and create a public narrative that casts herself as the victim. Before any lawsuit was filed, Blake had already planted the idea among insiders, cast members, studio staff, and reporters that Baldoni was dangerous and toxic. She reportedly used his own public admissions about past mistakes and efforts to grow as a man to portray him as a serial offender. This wasn't an emotional reaction, it was strategic. Blake allegedly manipulated those confessions, flipping them into accusations designed to strip Baldoni of credibility before he had a chance to defend himself. The smear campaign wasn't accidental or reactionary. It was organized, deliberate, and aligned with a larger effort to dominate the narrative and destroy Baldoni's reputation before legal proceedings ever began. Blake Lively's longtime publicist Leslie Sloan added another explosive layer to the unfolding scandal by demanding a staggering $1.3 million in legal fees after her portion of the lawsuit was dismissed. Sloan, who had been closely tied to Blake's media strategy for years, argued that defending herself against Justin Baldoni's claims was costly and unjustified, so she wanted Baldoni and Wayfarer Entertainment to pay up. But her demand quickly backfired. Text messages between journalist James Vushka and Baldoni's legal team surfaced, revealing just how entangled Sloan was in the media machine that had fueled Blake's narrative. Even more damaging, Sloan reportedly admitted she didn't even know about certain incidents until they were made public, contradicting her aggressive legal stance and making her massive fee request appear opportunistic. To many, it looked like she was trying to cash in on the chaos she helped create. Her involvement reinforced the growing perception that Blake's entire legal offensive wasn't about justice. It was a coordinated PR and legal campaign powered by insiders, media handlers, and financial motives. Sloan's demand didn't just raise eyebrows, it cast even more doubt on the integrity of the entire case. As Blake Lively's lawsuit against Justin Baldoni spiraled deeper into contradictions, the timing of another Hollywood legal bombshell only made things worse for her public image. In mid-2025, professional stunt performer Devin Labella came forward with shocking allegations against Kevin Costner, accusing him of engineering an unscripted and violent assault scene on the set of Horizon 2 in 2020. But what set Labella's case apart, and made it so devastating for Blake by comparison, was that Labella came with receipts. Labella didn't rely on emotionally charged interviews or vague statements to the press. She brought real-time evidence, text messages, emails, metadata, and documented conversations with the film's intimacy coordinator, Celeste Chaney. In those communications, Labella explicitly voiced concerns about what she described as an abomination of a scene that crossed serious boundaries. She had raised red flags at the time of the incident, not retroactively. Her attorney didn't need to build a media narrative. The cold, hard documentation spoke volumes. This avalanche of evidence made Labella's case appear grounded, transparent, and credible, everything that Blake Lively's case increasingly lacked. Despite months of legal filings, high-profile media coverage, and public outrage, Blake had yet to provide a single documented piece of evidence. No text messages to Ryan Reynolds explaining what happened. No emails to the production team. No communications with anyone on set voicing discomfort or boundaries being crossed. In fact, the few texts that did surface painted the opposite picture. Casual, even flirtatious exchanges with Baldoni that undercut the severity of her later claims. Adding to the damage, the journalist who originally helped break Blake's story, Megan Twohey of the New York Times, had already revealed that Blake privately admitted the Baldoni situation wasn't the worst thing she had experienced in Hollywood. That statement alone gutted the emotional weight of her lawsuit. When laid side by side with Devin Labella's well-documented, timely, and serious allegations against Costner, Blake's legal narrative started to look flimsy, opportunistic, and heavily curated for media optics. The media and public quickly took notice. Outlets began running side-by-side comparisons, showing how Labella's methodical, proof-based approach revealed just how manufactured Blake's case appeared by contrast. Even entertainment reporters and legal analysts who had once been sympathetic started questioning why Blake, with her access, power, and platform, had no concrete evidence to support such serious claims. The damage was profound. Not only did it call Blake's credibility into question, but it also reignited scrutiny around the entire smear campaign narrative, suggesting that the real objective may have been control and reputation management, not justice or accountability. Meanwhile, Labella's story was praised for its transparency and bravery, which only further intensified the backlash against Blake. In trying to maintain control of her image through legal and media means, Blake Lively instead watched it unravel, magnified by a real victim's story that exposed her own as increasingly hollow. As the contradictions in Blake Lively's story piled up, the public and media began to turn, not with sympathy, but with suspicion. What had once been framed as a courageous act of speaking out began to look more like a calculated media and legal maneuver, carefully choreographed to control the narrative rather than seek justice. Influencers, legal commentators, and even longtime fans of the Lively-Reynolds power couple started dissecting the inconsistencies between Blake's public persona and the private truths that were now surfacing. Key players in the entertainment news world, Perez Hilton, The Rush Hour, Flossom Talk, and others, began publishing content that shifted the tone from support to scrutiny. They examined not just the absence of evidence in Blake's accusations, but also the timeline. Why had she waited months to file a lawsuit when she'd already gotten Baldoni to sign a 17-point behavior agreement and agree to her terms on set? Why did she escalate the situation publicly only after securing private control behind the scenes? Legal experts chimed in, pointing out that Blake's lawsuit leaned heavily on emotional appeals rather than concrete proof. In contrast to Devin Labella's airtight case against Kevin Costner, which was built on a paper trail of messages and complaints filed in real time, Blake's claims were retroactive, vague, and riddled with contradictions. This discrepancy didn't go unnoticed by fans, who flooded comment sections and forums with questions. If it was really that serious, why didn't she have receipts? And why would Ryan Reynolds go nuclear with his accusations if Blake herself said it wasn't that bad? Public trust in the couple's intentions started to crack. Even their most loyal followers began questioning the integrity behind their brand, one that had long been built on humor, transparency, and relatability. Suddenly, Ryan's snarky social media posts and Blake's empowerment messaging felt hollow, even performative, when measured against the behind-the-scenes tactics that were now being exposed. It wasn't just about the lawsuit anymore, it became a broader cultural conversation about how celebrities use media control, PR manipulation, and personal influence to shape public perception. In Blake and Ryan's case, the curtain had been pulled back, revealing not authenticity, but strategy. The damage was done. The public wasn't just skeptical, they felt duped, and that feeling sparked a backlash the couple's PR machine couldn't spin away. What began as a legal dispute evolved into the complete public unraveling of Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' meticulously curated brand. For years, they were seen as Hollywood's golden couple, witty, relatable, charitable, and scandal-free. But by mid-2025, that image was in tatters. With every deposition, leaked quote, and contradictory interview, it became clear their story wasn't one of justice, but of manipulation. Blake's contradictions were at the core of the collapse. Privately admitting to the New York Times' Megan Twohey that the incident with Justin Baldoni wasn't serious, while publicly launching a full-scale lawsuit, painted her not as a victim, but as a strategist. Her demand that Baldoni sign a 17-point behavior contract months before going public suggested she had already resolved the situation in private, yet chose to escalate it in the court of public opinion. That wasn't courage, it was control. Ryan Reynolds' reckless move to publicly label Baldoni a predator only made things worse. His statements, reportedly shared with Hollywood insiders and executives at WME, directly contributed to Baldoni being dropped by his agency, despite no criminal findings or proof. His defense, based on emotion and influence, showed how Hollywood clout could be used to sabotage a career without due process. Meanwhile, Blake's publicist Leslie Sloan entered the chaos, demanding $1.3 million in legal fees after being dismissed from the lawsuit. Her request, seen alongside text messages contradicting her knowledge of key events, came off as yet another cash grab fueled by the very spectacle Blake helped create. Then came the final blow, the Kevin Costner-Devin Labella case. Labella's airtight documentation and direct evidence stood in stark contrast to Blake's hazy narrative. While Labella showed what real-time accountability looked like, Blake's case seemed cobbled together in hindsight, backed more by headlines than hard proof. Psychologists like Dr. Ramani called out the pattern. Blake's actions aligned with classic narcissistic smear tactics, weaponizing influence, twisting facts, manipulating sympathy, and flipping the script when challenged. The public took notice. Supporters turned skeptics. Influencers turned critics. The media, once complicit in the image building, began dissecting the very machinery that propped the couple up. By the time depositions rolled around, Blake was no longer seen as a symbol of empowerment. She was seen as the architect of a manufactured narrative, one that used media spin, legal pressure, and celebrity privilege to dominate the conversation. And Ryan Reynolds, once beloved for his quick wit and charm, was now under fire for recklessly wielding his influence to destroy a man's reputation based on incomplete information. The fallout wasn't just legal, it was cultural. The lively Reynolds brand, once synonymous with integrity and charm, had become a case study in how far a false narrative can go when powered by fame. And as the public connected the final dots, they realized the real meltdown wasn't happening in court, it was happening behind the scenes of the very empire Blake and Ryan built on smoke and mirrors.